Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where writers sit around drinking tasty beverages to talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. There will be rants and raves and opinions that may not agree but are lovingly delivered. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. I'm Jeannie Warner, and this is episode 222, interview with Steve Schlam. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, how are you?
I am very well. Thanks for joining us. My understanding from your agent who pitched is that you are an actor, an author, and I hear an ex-lawyer in there, so that's a pretty wide range.
I've had what they call a checkered history, yes.
That's beautiful. And this is, my understanding, is your first full-length novel that went to publication, correct?
That is right.
The Harvesting of Haystacks Cane. Now, I kind of wanted to say, is this your first ever written novel or just the first one that you've published?
It's the first one I've published.
Excellent.
And it's a novel that I published at the age of 78. I didn't write it at the age of 78, but I published it at the age of 78. And it has subsequently been longlisted for 2 international literary prizes or awards. And I've had excerpts published here and there. And so I have had the opportunity to see myself as a success after a very long period of time. And it feels very much like a victory, like I ran a marathon and crossed the finish line.
Oh, totally. And anyone that actually gets a first novel out and publishes it, I mean, total victory lap. My arms, you guys can't see it, but my arms are in the air kind of waving for you. Yeah, go you, because it's fantastic.
You know, there's a tinge of sadness about that because, I mean, I'm now 80 and the runway for the publication of additional novels, particularly if they're going to be created as of now, is shorter than it would have been had I been published in the, when I was 30 or 40 or whatever. But nevertheless, none of this feels like a valedictory. None of it feels like a last hurrah. It feels, as I said, very much like a triumph.
Have you ever watched any marathon? Do you know about the DFL trophy?
I do not.
DFL means dead fucking last. And they all the winners gather around when the very last person finishes.
Right.
Oh, there's so much cheering because it matters.
That is wonderful. It's wonderful.
It means that somebody got off of their couch and did it. And that's why I'm excited about first novels for so many people, because there are so many people that say, well, I think I've got a novel in me, or I always wanted to write one. I'm like, now's a good time. If not now, then we'll start tomorrow. Or, hey, we are looking at NaNoWriMo coming up here, right?
You know, my novel, it is a complicated literary novel. It's very much concerned with language. Language is virtually a character in the novel. And while it's set in the world of wrestling, my main character, Haystacks Cane, who was born Herschel Cane in Brooklyn, New York, is a wrestler. Or let me put it this way. This novel is about wrestling like Moby Dick is about a big white fish.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is about wrestling. It's about wrestling with the meaning of things, about whether there's a malign force in the universe that has brought my character to the sad and sorry state he finds himself in, lying in a hospital bed with spaghetti tubes coming out of him from all sides, having been injured, gravely injured in a match with his longtime rival and nemesis, a wrestler called Valentino, who holds the Heart of America title that he himself would love to own. And a man who has seduced his wife and made him a cuckold, and he is trying to figure out, what's happened, both in the short run and over the longer course of his life, a life that's filled with tragedy of one sort or another, a father who left the family, a mother who's hit and killed in a hit and run accident, and a sister who loves him desperately and serves as his protector, who is raped in front of his eyes when he's a boy and who ultimately commits suicide. And he's trying to figure out what it is. What is the meaning of it? The it that's taken all these people from him and left him in this, as I said, sad and sorry state. And whether or not there is a countervailing force, an it that is benign and will take him, release him from the bonds of this of this painful history and transport him to a kind of Eden that he dreams of, and that Eden is Greece, particularly the island of Rhodes, because Haystacks, or Herschel, is a butterfly collector, something he picked up from his dad and has maintained ever since. And he wants to go to Rhodes, live in Rhodes, live in this butterfly sanctuary called Petaludus, which, if you anagram him, comes out as loud petals, and that is, in his mind, the sound of butterflies. And of course, butterfly wings, if you think about it, don't really make a sound, but they represent a kind of an ineffable wonder, the kind of elevated state we find ourselves in at moments of peak experience that allows us to kind of, how shall I say, be here now, in the words of Richard Albert, or Baba Ram Dass, as he's called, to merge with the universe in ways that we are never otherwise able to.
I was going
I'm
to
sorry. I'm go ahead.
No, I was going to say before we go get, deeper and what happens at the end, et cetera, I want to kind of jump back to the beginning a little bit
Sure.
because it opens up. I was going to say you have a definite Faulkner stream of consciousness sort of way, and I've never really read a book quite like this one, and I thought you're pretty brave because you let the reader wander through the brains of many characters,
Yep.
not
That's right.
not just the equivalent of, I don't know if you read The Butterfly and the Diving Bell, but
Oh, no, I have not. No, I have not.
the Butterfly and the Diving Bell was the first one that ever screwed up what is really the male gaze. That's assuming in so many books that the reader is male, heterosexual, straight, and fully command of all of their consciousness and being, and often white, often waspy, etc. And The Butterfly and the Diving Bell is told from a man who is paralyzed,
Yeah.
who doesn't have that.
Didn't they make a movie out of that with Javier Bardem or something like that?
Possibly I'll look it up and I'll put it in the notes at the end. But that was kind of where I got a feeling when I was, your first three pages are, I had to read them a couple times because it was very stream of consciousness. And I had to like, okay, where are we? What's going on? And then when you start, when he starts saying, okay, that's where we are now and where we are right now, for somebody that is in and out of consciousness in a hospital, and one presumes in and out of many different drug concoctions flowing in through various tubes,
Correct.
yeah, it's hard. But then you take us back to the beginning fairly quickly, which grounds it. And that was a flow that I really liked about it, that you said, okay, once he was just this kind of a big kid trying to figure out what he wanted to do about his life. Mm-hmm. So now you'd mentioned, we, in a side conversation you and I had, you said, hey, this is wrestling from the 50s or 60s, because I didn't find wrestling until the 90s.
Right.
The redneck soap opera, everything is very scripted, everything is very, glitzy and full of fake satin.
Yeah, it's always been full of fake satin. Yes, it was the same back in the 50s and 60s, but not as ramped up, is the way I would put it. I mean, you saw it on TV. You could obviously attend matches, but I was a kid. You saw it on TV. The whole thing was, the arenas were grimy and gritty. The lighting wasn't very good, and the crowd was always restless, always, and ready to jump on whoever was the villain du jour. You saw it in black and white mostly. You could just about smell the sweat through the TV screen.
So you watched it a lot when you were a kid? You were a fan?
I watched it regularly, yeah. And, all the characters were outsized. I mean, not just physically, although most of them were, but in their personas as well. Everyone was a stereotype, or at least a type, but usually a stereotype. Everyone was a hero or a villain. Each of them, as I said, was a type. So there were Nazis. There were bleached blonde heartthrobs like Gorgeous George or the Graham brothers. These names don't mean anything to you.
Oh, they do. I'm a geek.
There was Antonina Rocco, who wrestled barefoot. Then there was Happy Humphrey. There were always fat men, like my character is. Happy Humphrey supposedly weighed 900 pounds and supposedly died after suffering, I don't know, an aneurysm or a heart attack, and he died because they weren't able to fit him through the hospital doors because he was too big. So what I did was I went when I the novel came to me in a dream. It didn't come to me fully formed, but the outline of it, a kind of a sketch, came to me in a dream. A series, an onrush, I should say, of clamoring voices, which in the beginning made me think, well, I'm finally gone over the edge. I'm in Crazyville. And then I realized it was characters talking to me. And I realized almost instinctively, not almost instinctively, instinctively, that what I had was the makings of a novel. I knew it wasn't a story. It was too much and too big. And I had the fat man character from the very beginning. I had the last line of the book from the very beginning. In fact, that's what I was sleeping, and that's what threw me out, or threw me up, I should say, into consciousness again, was the last line of the book. And so then I frantically tried to capture as much of this as I possibly could. I went out to my government issue used desk and started scribbling. And eventually I did this for several hours, trying again to capture as much of the voice of each voice as I possibly could, sitting there in under the sixth floor of a sixth-floor apartment building in New York in the middle of July, which is hot, tight, sweaty, smelly New York. And then had to make the decision about whether to go to work in the morning because I wanted to eat, and so did my wife at the time. And anyway, or the alternative was to simply kick over everything and just sit there and write and write and write and write, forget about work, and and head off into the forest of the unknown, hoping that somehow or other there'd be food to eat as I went along. And I found I didn't have the courage to do that, and so I did put on my monkey suit and in the morning and head into the subway to go to work again. But as far as the wrestling part of it is concerned, I went and did a whole lot of research. First of all, I went to several wrestling matches in Madison Square Garden with the version of Madison. I'm from New York. Well, obviously, I think that's.
It's in your voice. You can't hide it from us.
Oh, yeah, okay. Some people say no. Some people say yes. I'm fine with that.
Well, hold on. Say Long Island for us.
Say it again.
Say Long Island for us.
Long Island.
Oh,
No,
I can see you were trying hard.
You're not going to trap me there. No.
No, do go on.
But in any event, so I went to Madison Square Garden, the version of Madison Square Garden that was in existence at that time, and a couple of other arenas as well, always with the purpose of soaking up the atmosphere of the world that I remembered. And atmosphere is a very important key, the sights, the smells, and then to experience once again the kind of strict moral universe that presents itself in a wrestling arena, in which it's an endless struggle between good and evil, between good guys and bad guys, and justice is not always meted out, which is, if you think about it, a pretty good life lesson.
And the good guys do not always win in wrestling, but the whole point of it is that means you can have a grudge match and everybody wants to come back to see what happens.
That's exactly right.
Empire Strikes Back is a bad moment for everybody, but we all paid to watch that third movie for it, didn't we?
Yes, we did. We did indeed. In a way, it's a wonderful world because there's no gray, really. It's all black and white. There's no moral ambiguity. A guy who is good. Sometimes you'd have wrestlers who would flip. A good guy would become a villain, or a villain would become a good guy. It's almost you can see it in a movie like The Terminator, for example.
I did think of Mick Foley a lot while I was reading this, so yeah.
I did all my research. I read tons of reams of Ring magazine, which was in those days in the 50s and 60s, the I think they called it the Bible of boxing, but it also had a wrestling section. And then they actually published a wrestling version of Ring magazine. So I read tons of those, and the whole purpose being to imbibe that world so that I could then transmute it in the way it needed to be transmuted for my purposes in the novel and set it out on the printed page.
Well, I liked that it was little by little. You didn't throw too much. I mean, what you did was you did lot of really good world building. Okay, we see clearly this was, mid-century family, not too much money, but hey, you have a real big kid. And then the unexpected depths of our Herschel, and I'm sorry, I think of him as our Herschel at this point, like,
Yeah, let's call him Herschel. It's easier that way. Yeah.
yeah, we're haystacks, but the boy, you wrote him a human math whiz. It could have kept him working as a bookkeeper, but clearly numbers didn't interest him. And it was funny how he ended up doing something associated with what he was what people can perceive. He's a big guy, rather than something he knew and something that was intellectually, I mean, easier for him. I had a brother that was a math whiz like that. So it
He
was,
was Herschel. I mean, I love Herschel in the end, I think.
yeah,
I think you have to love all your characters, maybe less or more, but you love all of them. He is a true innocent. He reminds me of a kind of a mix between Candide, Voltaire's, what will I call him, is Voltaire's innocent abroad who believes that this is the best of all possible worlds,
poor fellow. Yeah.
and and Ferdinand the Bull, who from the famous children's book, which has been made into a movie a few times as well. There was an animated version just a few years ago.
Yep.
It is the story, as I think you know, of a Spanish bull who is big and powerful, but who has absolutely no desire to enter the bull ring, who only wants to sit in the fields and smell the flowers.
Yeah.
Um, and my character sees the good in everybody. He has no real interest in fame or fortune. He's suckered into being a wrestler by the promise of travel. He's working in the post office, actually, and he wasn't a bookkeeper, but he working in the post office, lugging mail bags with his, given his size and frame and so on. When his manager meets him and sees the possibility of utilizing him as a character to make a profit from, and he doesn't, he knows that his manager rips him off in many different ways, and he doesn't really care. He wants to travel. He has the idea of going to places all over the place, all over the country, I should say. Means he gets a chance to look at butterflies that are native to various areas in the United States. That excites him much more than the idea of winning a championship. He'd be happy to win one, but if he doesn't, that's okay too. And that is what is harvested in the end.
Yeah.
His innocence. All these experiences, the very painful and upsetting family history and his life as a wrestler bring him to this place where he then has to decide what is the meaning of it, which is in essence, what's the meaning of life, my life in particular, and what shall I do about it? Because it's like the Zen slap, he's all of a sudden aware in ways that he hasn't been aware all along, or has been aware of and ignored.
I don't know if you had any soundtracks that you listened to while you were writing this, but all I could think of is over and over again is the Talking Heads, the Once in a Lifetime.
Oh yeah.
I could think of Herschel lying there saying, "This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful."
Yeah. That's wonderful. I was not listening to that at the time. Honestly, Jeannie, I don't remember what I was listening to.
Fair enough.
But that would have been a perfect soundtrack, because so much of this is about identity, of finding one's true and authentic self after living in a false identity for so many years.
And if we view the hospital, it could be a chrysalis of sorts where
That's right. That's
not
wonderful.
just growing wings, you actually have to dissolve into goo. So, if any of you out there feel like you're just melted in a little puddle, you're not done yet. You're not finished growing wings.
Yeah. The idea of, I honestly don't remember whether I consciously chose the butterfly imagery or whether it just sort of came to me. I'm not sure they're not one and the same thing. But
It could have been part of your brain was having a small homage to Muhammad Ali's Float Like a Butterfly.
yeah, no. That no, that it could be, but it wasn't.
Fair enough.
Um,
With this song, you said that this kind of came to you and you heard all the conversations. Um, do you consider when you were writing this, were you a plotter? Did you outline it, or was it more of an organic gardening process?
okay, so I'm not sure what an organic gardening
Well,
process
people
means.
don't like the word pantser, so I'm trying to find an alternative. A
I don't
plotter
know
for
what
pantser.
I don't know what that means at all. But I mean, I can say it this way: it came to me in a dream, not fully formed, but I had the outlines. I had I had a character. I knew he was in distress. I knew he was on, and it was life and death level distress. And I knew he was oversized. Then the details began to come. And so it was as though I had sketched out something on the canvas in charcoal or pencil, perhaps. And then now the task became filling in all the colors and making the shapes firm. And that took me a good deal of time to do. I struggled sometimes. I knew, when you're a beginning writer, I think when you're a beginning just about anything, you tend to over control because you're insecure about what you're doing. You don't have all that much experience under your belt and you're not certain. And so I think whenever anyone's in that situation, not whenever, but quite often at least, one tends to reach for control. And that means you're imposing order on material that isn't necessarily orderly. That's the purpose of imposing order, of course. But what it can do, my ex-wife used to study with Norman Rabin, who is the son of the great Yiddish writer Shalom Aleichem. Bob Dylan studied with him at one point as well. And he always would say that consciousness kills art. And I think what he meant really was self-consciousness kills art. And I have found that to be so true. And I found when I was writing this novel that material that is hot, it's like it's hot liver from the beef liver from the kill that you have to take and cool and shape. That material comes from your subconscious. It lives alongside the scarier places with the scarier feelings that, again, are alongside the impulses that create art. In my case, what I call the river of words that create fiction. What I found was when you and I'm going to mix the metaphor, and it's a lousy metaphor, so I apologize.
Go for it.
When you loosen the reins and give the character his or her head, and let the character go where the character needs to go and reveal his or her heart and soul, I suppose, in the end. Well, in that process, the flow is great. There were periods when I would write things, and it would be like it was literally flowing out of my arm, writing itself, and I was kind of sitting back and observing the process. And then when I was uptight for whatever reason, when I felt dry for whatever reason, and I attempted to make the thing happen, so to speak, then I struggled. Then I sweated. And that is because I believe the channel in my psyche to my subconscious, where creativity lives, alongside the places where the nasties live too and are always kind of restless. When that channel is open, the work flows, as I said. And when it wasn't, it didn't. And so the writer, it seems to me, particularly of a first novel, has to, I mean, it doesn't have to be in the context of a first novel, but the writer of a first novel, that is to say, I'm going to go back and forth, and I apologize again, that it can be when you're first starting out writing anything, short stories, poetry, or a novel that doesn't finally take shape, you have to develop a channel into that subconscious. If you can do that and let yourself alone and let your characters alone, so to speak, you will and they will perform in the way you envision them performing. They will take you, the characters, I mean, may take you in different directions than you initially conceived of, but they will still take you where you need to go, and most importantly, where they need to go. And the book comes.
I like that. That's really good advice for a new writer to think about, that it's not you, it really is your character.
Yeah, that's right.
You also made me wonder, it's like I almost wonder if you said, okay, for somebody in a class and you mentioned you did creative writing, did you ever say, write the story Gothic horror, now write it this way, now write it that? Because I am fairly convinced we all have a very dark river that runs inside us, along with the, pretty rippling sunny ones.
Right. And we do. And that's what I was just talking about, actually.
Yeah.
Those two things, what I call the nasties, live alongside our most elevated selves. You have to be willing to go to the darker places, or to at least be in the same place where the darker places also live. Because if you attempt to hold them off, you're going to hold off everything else as well. And you don't want to do that, quite obviously.
I also just wanted to touch here the very end of it. You left a very interesting question for the reader of Haystacks after the end of the book. Where and what and how is he? And I actually at first was like, wait, I'm not sure. And then I realized that's a really good point that you made me ask that.
That's right. That is purposeful. That was purposeful. I want the reader to and it's funny, it's almost like a wrestling match where the crowd is asked to indicate thumbs up or thumbs down.
Very Roman, very Roman.
And yeah, very Roman, yeah, indeed. I did that on purpose because I think that by I don't know if encouraging is the right word, but by kind of almost insisting that the reader make the decision, does he survive? We see him at the end in the company, a black streetwalker in New York. I don't say it's New York, but I think you can kind of derive that.
We guessed, yeah.
They are together. And the question then is, how did he get out of the hospital? Is he really out of the hospital? Is this just another vision he's having while lying, semi-comatose in his hospital bed? There's some back and forth between the orderlies that precedes this that gives you the sense that either he's being prepped to leave or being prepped for a more serious operation.
Yeah.
It's up to the reader to decide, does he survive? And it seems to me, and seemed to me when I was writing it, that in asking the reader to make that decision, it shows the reader's own worldview, where he or she sits on the continuum of hope versus despair. And I think everybody has a place on that continuum that is operative at all times. And it affects our lives, both our personal lives and our political lives and so on.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That is a different level of trust between you and any reader. And I don't often see that. So that's what really made this unique for me, both the opening and the way you closed it out. So it was a beautiful painting and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, we will put links to the fascinating things we discussed during this episode on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. Steve, thanks so much for joining me today, and I really, really enjoyed the harvesting of Haystacks cane.
And I thank you once again, both for that enjoyment and for having me today. I much enjoyed it myself.
Oh, it's a delight. You've all been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web magic is cast by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer is Ksenia Chernievskia with backup David Welsh and John Schmidt. Our intro and exit music are both performed by Michael Ingberg, who lives down under in Hervey Bay and runs Tin Can Music School. Our podcast sponsors are Jackal Designs, The Bean Scene, Arm Street, and wherever you like to take your notebook and write. And hey, thanks for listening.